Well, this is the recordproduction.com interview, and today we're at Modern World Studios in deepest Gloucestershire with Clint Murphy. Hello, Clint.
Hello, thank you.
Welcome. Well, yeah, you should be welcoming me actually, shouldn't you? Yeah. Here we are in lovely studio, because you work here quite a lot, don't you?
Yeah, I actually probably spend a good 80% of my time here. I mean, I kind of moved here to work here. Yeah. Effectively.
Right.
Yeah.
So tell us how you got into the into music, and how that got you into the business.
Well, I started basically playing drums when I was about 10 years old. My father got me into drumming. He was in a band, and actually
he was a professional?
Yeah, when he was in his younger days, he was, and then they sort of split up. He was in quite a well-known band in New Zealand.
So they had hits in the early days?
Well, they had...
before you were born?
Yeah, they had... got to be careful what I say, you might be deeply offended. No, they had a couple of singles on radio and that kind of thing. Right. I mean, nothing major. It was, very, very local, but, pretty big in Auckland and New Zealand. Yeah. And they kind of reformed when they were sort of in their 40s, and he bought a drum kit and... sort of showed me the basics and kind of took it off from there, really.
And you had lessons?
Yeah, had lessons, just at high school and that kind of thing. But it was kind of the drumming, I guess, that kind of got me into the music industry and made me realise that's what I want to do,
So what gave you the idea of recording studios? Was it? Can you remember if it was, did you see something on the telly about it, or you didn't actually know of any studios locally, or?
It was... We actually had a studio at our high school, and I kind of basically spent most of my time kind of in the studio during lunchtime and doing live sound for bands and that kind of thing, and it just sort of took off from that.
What gear did they have in the school then?
It was like they had a Tascam 8-track recorder. I had no idea how to use it. I don't even know what the desk was. It was some 24-track thing, and they had like these Sennheiser microphones, which like the 421s and that kind of thing, and I was sort of putting them up on the side, singing into the side of them, because that's what I thought you did. And, really terrible recordings, but it was kind of a starting ground to...
So you knew you fancied doing that?
Yeah, it was...
And how did you go about pursuing that after school then?
I went to SAE.
Ah, right.
Yeah.
Is there one in Auckland then?
There is, yeah. So, I pretty much studied there, and actually it was kind of during my studies I decided that I quite liked teaching actually, and actually helping out students. And
they quite encourage that, don't they, SE? They kind of do recycle.
They do, yeah. I got recycled, and ended up becoming, well, first of all I was just sort of assisting and doing the cleaning, and then I ended up doing admin, and then they put me on a few courses, teaching courses, and then eventually became one of their lecturers. So I was lecturing for a couple of years actually. Yeah, which I really enjoyed, but after sort of 2 or 3 years, I kind of got a bit sick of talking the talk and not really walking the walk. So that's when I sort of knocked on the door of my mate's studio. Yeah.
Right. And which studio was this then?
It's actually York Street Studios in Auckland, New Zealand, which is
that's quite a proper studio, isn't it?
It is, yeah. It'd be New Zealand's top recording studio, and the guy who was the studio manager, Jeremy, he was a friend of mine through SAE as well, another recycled student.
Nice.
And so he basically said, look, do you want to come in and work for us for a measly wage? And I did. And
so did they actually need an engineer, or did you?
Not really. They kind of were in the process of sort of reshuffling a little bit. But I kind of knew that working in a big studio meant working with the the best bands and international producers and that kind of thing. One of the first projects I worked on was with Gil Norton and Danton Supple. So straight away I was sort of thrown into that kind of this is how.
What was Gil doing in New Zealand then? What was he?
He was recording a band called the Feelers, which is quite a big New Zealand band,
and how did you get on with him? And
great actually. It was some pretty long hours. It was a bit of a shock to me.
He's quite intense, isn't he? He's quite. Sort of...
It was, but I don't know. Everyone sort of said, he's a bit of a hard worker and all that, and for sure. But to me, it was all I knew, and I guess maybe that's where I got a lot of my work ethic from.
Yeah. Good grounding then.
That was very good grounding, and especially from Danton as well. I learned a lot from him, and I kind of learned not to mess up too much, otherwise I'll sort of, got in a bit of trouble and that kind of thing.
And
so,
was this on tape at this stage? Was it an analog tape?
No, this was Pro Tools actually.
So when was this? Sort of late 90s, is it?
Yeah, it was sort of late 90s, early, 99 I think, like that, something like that. Yeah.
Right.
I mean, I kind of, when I first started engineering, I was brought up on tape and have gone through that whole transition.
Right.
I don't really record on tape now.
I don't think anybody do. Well,
I know.
very few anyway.
Well, it's sort of a not very cool thing to say, is it? To say, hey, I record to Pro Tools. You always get the tape heads go,
Yeah. Well, there's not many people who can afford to do it, is there?
Well, that's it, yeah. And I think, to be honest, some of the, I mean, the Pro Tools are so good these days, and converters, and there's so much cool analog gear and ribbon microphones, and you can still get those big fat warm sounds, without having to go down the expensive route. And
So what was your big break then? Presumably you were pretty much assisting Danton and Gil then, were you? And
yeah, it was basically
making the tea and
kind of working with those guys, and then I started working, really recording a lot of New Zealand's, bands, and
so presumably you were quite an expert Pro Tooler from all the SAE experience. You kind of
well, not really. I mean, Pro Tools was just when I was there, it was all tape. Pro Tools was still, what was it, 4 or 8 tracks or something?
Yeah.
So it was all kind of a little bit foreign to me. It was really probably that first time working with Gil and Danton that was like.
Was Danton doing all the Pro Tools?
Yeah, it was like, editing drums and all that kind of thing, and I kind of got thrown in the deep end a little bit at times, and ended up basically jumping on with Gil, doing the recording while Danton was in another suite doing editing.
All the drums in time.
Yeah. It was when Beat Detector first came out, so we were all learning how to use that. Yeah.
Brilliant. So what was your big break then? What was your first sort of proper engineering gig? Did you?
Probably the biggest one would probably have to be recording Melanie C, actually.
Yeah. That was with Greg Haver.
That was with Greg, yeah. Greg and I had kind of been
so it
working
seemed to have
together.
quite a lot of producers from the UK coming over to York Street then.
Well, really probably only Greg and Gil and Danton.
Yeah.
But Greg and I started quite a big working relationship, and I mean, we pretty much work 80% of the time together now.
Yeah.
So in 2004, I moved to London.
Yeah.
And
was that? Did you have anything planned in London, or you just came over speculatively?
I just came over as a. I mean, I kind of.
So you'd already worked with Greg at this point, had you?
I had, yeah. We'd worked together for about 3 years, and I sort of, kind of, I guess, outgrew New Zealand a little bit.
Yeah.
Like there's only. I mean, don't get me wrong. New Zealand's amazing, and there's a lot of great bands, but there's only a small amount of bands, and not a lot of people getting signed, and so that's why I wanted to move over, and I was kind of lucky the first week I got here. I ended up doing the Melanie C project, which was pretty scary for me actually.
Well, it would be for anybody, I suppose, wouldn't it?
Well, especially since I spent my whole sort of engineering career working on vintage Neves, and I was the first studio I got thrown into was actually at Metropolis on a J series SSL,
Right.
What seemed like a million faders.
Yeah.
It was, ex-Spice Girls standing there. It was all very overwhelming. But
it's funny, the job of engineering, you're kind of expected to just know how the desk
everything,
works, and all the different buttons, and.
I mean, it's all relatively the same, but I mean, up until I guess me moving to the UK, I'd never really worked on SSL before, and
Well, that's probably the most complicated SSL to use as well, isn't it?
I think so, yeah. I kind of never really want to go there again.
No, me neither.
I mean, compared to the duality, which, was pretty much part of my reason for moving to this area, was to be here and work on the SSL. And, I mean, I love mixing on this, on this thing. It's really easy. And
so, Greg came to Modern World, did he, first of all, and brought you with him? Or did you make contact with this place?
Well, yeah, basically Greg made contact through a guy called, I don't know if you know Mike Banks. I think he's sitting right there.
I've heard of him. Yeah, he's a legendary mystery figure.
Very, very mysterious, yeah. It was kind of a contact through him and the studio owner, Nick Cowan. Basically what happened was I came over and did an album for Nick's daughter. And another album at the time, and just really loved it here. Yeah. And kind of thought, well, it's such an amazing area. Really fancied being out in the countryside. I didn't think I'd ever be able to do that. Yeah. Engineering always seems like one of those jobs where you have to be stuck in a major city.
Yeah.
So yeah, and then he basically said, you know, we'd love you to come and basically work out here all the time.
Right.
And I said, okay, I'll have a think about it. And then I went back to New Zealand, and a week later I said,
Said goodbye to your wife and 7 children.
yep, I'm coming over. Yeah. So I mean, that was about 6 months later. Me and the wife moved out and live in a sleepy little village called Didmartin, and
Lovely.
yeah, spending most of my time here.
Yeah. And your missus is happy here, is she? She doesn't miss home? Made some friends?
No, well, it's a little bit hard to make friends in the area.
Must be, yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of. There's not much of a young population in Tipperary. I think we've brought the general age up somewhat.
Yeah, they'll catch up.
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
But no, it's been really nice. You know, it's I love it here.
Yeah. So you're planning to stay then?
Planning to stay, yeah.
But going home for a few days over New Year, I gather.
Yeah. Actually, I'm leaving on Boxing Day to do 2 albums.
Oh right. Is this back at York Street?
Back at York Street.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's like putting an old pair of pants on. It's really comfortable there.
Yeah.
And no, it'll be good, and it'll be hot.
Yeah.
Summer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are you sleeping under the desk at York Street, or are you?
No, at my sister's. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Still got to keep the budget down somehow. So yeah. No, it should be good. Yeah, a couple of months there,
Right.
and I'll bring the project back here and mix it back here.
Oh right.
Yeah.
And these are New Zealand projects, though, are they?
Yeah, 2 New Zealand projects. Yeah.
Yeah. And the bands, are they?
Yeah, 2 New Zealand bands. One of the bands is actually coming over here to finish off the tracking.
And are you producing, or? Are you
No, that's actually with Greg. Yeah.
Oh, right,
Well,
okay.
there's two projects. One is Greg's production, and then another is one we're going to do sort of a joint co-production thing.
Oh right.
Yeah.
Okay. And have you kept up the musicianship? Do you still play the drums at all? Did you ever learn any other instruments?
Well, no, kind of. When I was very young, I started playing guitar.
Yeah.
You know, when I was about 8 or something like
Right,
that.
right.
Yeah. But I got a little bit sick of playing Kumbaya and Should Be Coming Round the Mountain, so I kind of gave that up.
Yeah.
And hence why I sort of took up the drums, because it was cooler to just bash something.
Well, yeah. Have you ever had a recording studio set up at home or anything like that? Have you got anything yourself? Have you got an inbox that you go home and do editing?
No.
Or do you
I was kind
strictly work in the studio?
Yeah, I was put off that a little bit. When I first was thinking about getting into the industry, and I sort of asked a good friend of mine, Nick Abbott, I said to him, do you think it's worth, me getting an inbox or whatever? And he said, bugger that, why don't you just come to somewhere like York Street and, get the band to pay for it.
Yeah.
So I kind of thought, well, that's fair enough. And I, did that. And I mean, I've bought gear along the way, bought microphones and compressors and all that kind of thing.
You got a few favourites that
I do definitely
invested
have a few
in.
Favourites, yeah.
Yeah.
But it's an expensive sort of habit to keep up in.
Well, it is, but I suppose those kind of things hold their value better than a Pro Tools rig. So
they do, yeah. And I think they become part of your, your tricks of the trade, what you've got, and it's what your sound kind of evolves from what you have as well.
Yeah.
But it's always nice to go to new studios and where there's different gear, and it kind of throws you out of your comfort zone, and you end up getting, new sounds, because there's new microphones and new compressors and that kind of thing.
So when you're working in here and you're mixing, do you bring everything up separately, or is there a bit of sub-mixing in the box goes on? Or?
I try and keep as much out on the console as I can. There is definitely some sub-mixing going on.
Yeah.
If I've got 2 microphones on a kick drum, I'll bring it out into one channel of the duality. But what's great about it is you can flick into Pro Control mode, and you still kind of feel like you're mixing. I mean, I was brought up to mix on a desk, so...
And do you get the assistants to write down all the settings after each mix then?
Yeah, I do, but often I kind of keep a lot of the outboard the same, if I...
It's lazy.
It's totally lazy, yeah. I think because what's been happening is I've been getting into the recall a lot, and I used to always do mix stems, especially when it was in York Street, because they didn't have any kind of recall, and writing down all the settings on the Neve meant it was always going to sound different anyway. But recording the stems obviously usually takes up
tedious thing
2 or 3 hours, and so I mean, actually last night I've just finished mixing an album for a New Zealand band, Op Shop, and I wanted to make some changes to like 3 or 4 songs, and I spent like 3 hours making those changes just by using the recalls and everything. And it still freaks me out when you do the recall and you listen back to it, it sounds the same. Yeah,
it's a bit of a strange thing, isn't it? When you dial it sort of feels a bit wrong, doesn't it?
It is.
You haven't gone through that process of getting to that point.
Yeah, but it's very cool. It's very cool. It means you don't have to worry too much about stuff, and you can come back to stuff. Yeah. So,
what's your typical sort of chain of recording if you're doing vocals? How often do you actually use the mic preamps in the duality? Because I noticed you've got a few in the rack, haven't you? There's one or two.
Yeah. I guess what I do most of the time is put up a couple of microphones, 2 or 3. I mean, I'm generally going for, like, I've got a Sony C800G.
Wow.
Which
is that yours?
That's mine. Yeah.
That must have been quite an investment.
It was quite an investment. The wife still doesn't know, so keep that quiet. I don't think she knows about the website, so yeah.
That's right. It's the old WAF, which we've mentioned before in interviews, the wife acceptance factor.
Oh yes.
It's a dodgy one, that. Yeah. Well, we've only. There's not time for confessions now, but we'll talk when the camera's off. Yeah.
Fair enough.
You've got a C800, so you stick that up.
Yeah, stick that up.
Is it because there's two? Is there 2 versions of that? There's a C800G.
Yeah, there's one which is basically the valve, and there's one that's the non-valve. There's basically the Mac Daddy Fabuloso.
Yeah, with all
the
bits on the back.
Yeah, it looks sort of like guns out of like a gun out of Aliens or something. It's quite cool. I mean,
and they're quite bright, aren't they?
They're really bright. I mean, so I usually stick up something like that, which is super bright, super pop. American pop.
Yeah.
And then I stick up. Like an 87 or a 67, or if I've got like a Telefunken, something like that. I mean, I usually just stick up like a 251 and a Sony if I can. Yeah. They've got a I think it's a Sound Deluxe 251, which is a rip-off of the Telefunken, and I really like that mic a lot. So if I stick those 2 mics up, and generally I'll put them straight into, I'll try some different mic pre's out, so into some Neves, try the APIs. It's usually one of those 2 actually. With the Sony, it's usually the Neve, just because it is quite bright and it kind of sort of just warms it up a little bit. Yeah. I've recently really been getting into the pre's on the duality, especially with the variable harmonic, whatever it's called, the VHD or something. So I was a little bit wary of them to start with, just because I've always been a Neve guy. But I'm finding myself more and more going to those, actually. And most of the time going around to the 3rd harmonic distortion. Right. Just because I've always been more kind of transistor as opposed to valve.
Yeah. Right.
Is this boring now? Are you falling
asleep?
It's
wonderful. No? It's technical stuff. It's
good. Yeah, so I'll do that, and compressor-wise, I'll go through usually Blackface 1176. There's none here. They've got one of the purples, which I'll use, and then I usually slam that quite a lot. Yeah, good 10 dB of.
Is a Blackface better than the silver one then? Do you think?
Well, I like it's a bit more mid-rangey, and it seems like there's a faster release time or something.
Right.
Yeah, I just kind of like the sound of it a lot better.
I can't say I've ever noticed the difference myself.
I just find the way they react's different. Yeah.
Right.
I mean, they're all different. Depending on how old it is, Yeah. But probably the big part of my vocal sound would be, I'm really a massive fan of the TG limiters. Yeah. Yeah. So I'll just absolutely slam it through that thing.
Oh really?
Yeah.
On limit mode.
It stays on the same settings all the time. I mean, I've got one of these myself, and limit mode,
fast release,
recovery one. It never. I mean, they should really just solder it on those settings. Because
I've never. I mean, I've used that setting on drums, but I've never used it on vocals.
Yeah, it's really. I really love it. Yeah. When it gets to a point where it gets a little bit sort of too kind of essy.
Distortion. Right.
But no, I mean, at York Street they had 4 of the original ones. Yeah. So I kind of use that a lot on drums and vocals. And then when I moved to the UK, I really missed them, so I bought a pair for myself and the new ones. The new ones are brighter than the old ones.
It's often the case, isn't it, with reissued things? I remember when I first tried out the Universal LA2A and 1176 reissues, they all seemed a bit brighter.
Brighter, yeah.
And I don't know, is that aging of components, or is that?
I don't know what it is really. I mean, the same with the microphone reissues too, isn't it? Like the Neumann's always brighter.
They've got a layer of spit all over.
Exactly. There's no spit. The valves are all new, and who knows? Yeah.
You just wonder if they really sounded that bright when they were
back
new
in the day,
in 1960. Or
they're just that they're knackered now. That's what it is.
Yeah, we just kind of go, oh, it's got that vintage sound. In fact, they're just knackered. So do you EQ a bit on the way in at all, or are you not?
Well, no, actually I don't, and I'm a massive fan of high pass filters, so I'll roll off anything I don't need. But with vocal, I mean, I'm struggling to think of the last session I did where I actually even EQ the vocal.
Yeah.
Even at mix
Even
stage.
at mix time, yeah.
Yeah. So that's why I make sure I pick the mic that I like, and usually that's why I love the Sony, because it's bright enough and it's full-bodied.
Yeah.
Same with the Telefunken.
Yeah.
And if I want a little bit of extra, like mid-range or something, I'll put it through like a Teletronic. So you kind of use compressors and limiters to actually add those EQs.
Plugins. Do you get into much plug-in usage when you're mixing?
I love the Echo Boy stuff. I use a lot of delays and a lot of.
So is that as an insert, or do you set up a send within the?
With sends, I kind of
So you kind of use it as an outboard.
As an outboard, yeah, for sure, yeah. Delays, basically delays and reverbs. Compression, if it's sort of like L3 or L1 type compression, brick wall. You know, if I want to use 1176, I'll use outboard. You know. Unless I'm sort of run out, and I'm really quite getting into the UAD stuff, and there's the Crystal Adage,
the waves,
which is what are the 1176 and the LA3A and the LA2A.
Right.
I use them quite a bit, but often for me plugins are for the effects, not so much of the compression and the EQ and stuff. Yeah.
And what about the practicalities of when mixing it? So if you don't do stems, but do you do like a TV backing track and an instrumental as a course of habit?
Yeah, I always do instrumental and vocal. I mean, most of the time, what I'm adjusting at the final stage is the vocal might not be loud enough for a mix, so it's easy enough to put the instrumental track and the vocal together rather than having to do a full recall.
So you run off a cappella?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
And how much do you actually process your main mix bus? Do you ever put an EQ and a compressor across that? Do you use the SSL?
I always use the SSL. Yeah. I'm pretty much a massive fan of fast releases. So for most compressors, it's always the fastest release you can go for. Yeah. That's why I like the TG, and that's why I like the 1176. And so with the SSL compressor, it's fast release, 4:1 kind of compression, and just really knocking off kicks and the snares, as it's coming through. But no, I don't really put any EQ on the mix bus. No. It's usually I try and get it right before it gets to that stage. I don't want to rely on just I need heaps of top end. Yeah, leave that for the mastering engineer, right? It's got to have something to do.
Have you got any opinions about mastering engineers? And do you is there somebody that you generally Greg uses or? Yeah,
I actually used to work for Sterling Sound as a rep, in New Zealand as a project coordinator. Right. So I got to know those guys quite well and used the majority of them, but have my favourites now, and it's I use a guy, Ryan Smith, who it's just amazing what he does.
Is he at Sterling?
He's at Sterling, and he's been there for a while, but he's not like sort of been there as long as like Ted Jensen and Calby and that kind of thing. Yeah. But the reason I like him is he just seems to complement my mixes really well. You know, a big part of my sound is quite a big, tight, punchy bottom end. I like it loud, but I don't want it uber squashed. Yeah. So that's why I'm going to some like him most of the time. Otherwise, if it's not him, it's Greg Calby. If I want something a little bit less sort of processed and a bit more pure and just.
Presumably neither of these guys are particularly cheap though to use, so it has to be a fairly.
They're pretty cheap. I think they're cheap. I mean, it's like $190 US a track. Right. And in New Zealand, it was costing me about the same to get it done there with someone who hasn't got a massive track record. And the guys, I think the guys in America for some reason, just they know the black art of mastering.
They do seem to, don't they? Yeah. Something a bit. They take more care of it, I think, as well, don't they?
Yeah. I don't know. Just send it off and it comes back good.
Yeah. Can't argue with that. So how does that work then, with your relationship with Greg? Because you said you're going to be doing a co-production together. Do you have different roles? Because he's a drummer as well, isn't he?
He is, yeah.
God, two of you.
I know.
So how does that work?
Drummers make the best producers, don't they?
Clearly.
I know we sort of met about 5 or 6 years back and started we just sort of hit it off, you know, kind of straight away really, and I ended up doing a lot of engineering for him. He was always doing the engineering, but I kind of stepped in, and I was actually his first, I think, engineer who he just let do the engineering, and started to take more of a, you know, a back seat on the engineering. And so
he sort of instantly trusted you to
I think
get
so.
on with a few things.
Yeah, I mean, he definitely had a few tricks and of the trade that he taught me, you know. You know, so
what did he teach you?
Well, I was always very meticulous about moving microphones and making sure it was the right microphone, and, you know, spending a lot of time getting it right, which is probably something I learned from Danton and Gil. And Greg came in, he's like, oh, that doesn't sound very good, just a bit of EQ, a bit of this, you know, and just do what you can to make it sound good. It doesn't matter if it's poor technique or not. If it sounds good, it sounds good. So
it's a bit more reckless.
So it's a bit more reckless, and that kind of took me out of the zone, I think, of being my engineering being like nice sounding recordings to actually something that had quite cool sounds and interesting sounds. Yeah, because Greg's very much a vibe kind of person, just go with what sounds great. So I mean, basically we ended up just working together, you know, I was his engineer for about sort of 2 or 3 years. And then when I moved back to New Zealand, I kind of then took on a production role at home and basically started producing.
Right.
And then after we sort of, during that time, we did a lot of stuff together. I mean, we were spending sort of 6 months a year together. I would fly over here to the UK, he would fly to New Zealand. So, you know.
So in between, you were producing your own projects, were you?
Yeah, that's right, yeah.
In New Zealand?
Yeah.
So you'd get clients in and do everything?
And do everything I was doing, producing engineering, which is fun, but I found really stressful. You know, like, it's just a lot to, you know, to do. And so, you know, I really loved working with Greg, so I kind of, that's why I thought, well, how can we kind of do this more together? And that's partly why I moved over here, actually. So we can kind of spend more time together as a sort of production team, you know. And he's great. He gives me a lot of freedom with things.
So did he suggest you move over here then, or did you?
No, it was.
Did you say to him, "I'm going to come over. Are you going to employ me for the next 5 years?"
Well, we kind of talked about, you know, how can we work together more, because this flying back and forth to New Zealand is just getting out of hand.
It's a long trek, isn't it?
It is, and it's expensive, you know, and it's not good for the wives too. When you spend, you know, 2 months overseas. So when we, I guess, started working at Modern World, when we first came to Modern World, I kind of said, well, I really like it here, I could fancy moving here. And he said, well, yeah, he could fancy moving from his place in Wales. And I was like, well, great, that's great, because it means we can work together more. We both enjoy working together more. You know, our work is much better when we work together. So it's just sort of how that evolved, really.
So when you're doing these co-production projects, then do your roles change at all, or do you just kind of carry on?
Well, this co-production one that's coming up is a little bit rare, actually. Most of the time I am sort of his engineer as such. This job in New Zealand that I'm going back for was actually a job that I started off producing and engineering, but then I kind of thought it would be great to get Greg involved as well, because it just works so much better. So I said to the band, you know, what about getting Greg involved? And they were like, they met him and they said, yeah, let's just have the A team. So, but most of the time, you know, I am really just engineering and he is producing. But it's a very free kind of style of engineering. He'll let me get up the guitar sounds and get I mean, he'll give me an indication of what he wants for a certain drum sound, but just let me do what I do, and if it's not right, he'll jump in and say, it's not right. And especially with mixing and everything, he just lets me mix, and then he'll come in at the end. I kind of don't let anyone sit in when I mix. I don't like anyone peering over my shoulder. You know, and I kind of like the fact that he can come in at the end and say, sounds great, but maybe the vocal's too quiet, you know, with a fresh set of ears. Because you often need that.
Absolutely,
When you're sitting in the room the whole time, you kind of...
So you don't even let the assistant sit in there when you're...
Oh, yeah, let the assistant sit in, You
do?
Yeah, but often they get bored because I'm just sort of zoning out.
Other good sort of recording tips or techniques that are particular to, you know, unusual things that you do?
Being a drummer, maybe I've got a few kind of bizarre and wacky tips. Well, I don't know if I call them wacky. Few tips that I've stolen off other people, actually, like the floor mic thing, which you've seen probably on record production before, but kind of modified most of them. So yeah,
presumably as a drummer, you're quite sort of on top of the actual things like the actual tuning of the kit and that kind of stuff. Do you feel you can sort of step in and comment on that when you're setting up a drum?
I'd definitely comment on it, but I'm really crap at tuning, to be honest. Yeah. So usually I get someone in.
Really?
But that's really important for me, is to get the drum sound right. You know, that's a massive thing. What I'm finding is a lot of people, I'm getting mixes these days from people, and it's just a really horrible drum sound, and they've just thrown a lot of samples on.
Yeah.
You know, so for me, it's making sure you got new drum skins, you've got the tuning right, and yeah, the drums sound great, and they don't need to rely on samples to actually sound good. I don't like a lot of bright room mics and stuff. I like them to be quite dull and quite, well, not dull, but just a bit more sort of fucked up.
Yeah.
If, so to speak, you know, like bits of squashed and loads of compression, you know, lots of the TG going on.
I think that's also something, a product of a lot of modern studios. When you sort of go a lot of brand new-ish kind of shiny looking studios do tend to have shiny, brash drum sounds, don't they, if you just throw mics around the room?
They do, yeah, and it's just a way of controlling that, really. You know, I don't, I like to keep my overheads nice and tight, so it's just really cymbals more than anything. Yeah. You know, really tight kick and snare, toms, and then try and get sort of the grittiness from just kind of bizarre sort of mic placements. Right. Yeah. I mean, nothing crazy like putting a microphone down the toilet or anything, but you know, I'm a big one to actually change the microphones out and rely on changing microphones before I jump for the EQ. But once I've got the right mic, I'm more than happy to just really go for it on the EQ side of things. Yeah. Whether it's getting a pull tech and just, you know, 100% of 60 hertz going on, you know, on the bottom end and that kind of thing, you know. Yeah.
You've been pretty much sort of almost the in-house engineer here for quite a time. Have you influenced the way things have developed?
Yeah, they've you know, changed a lot of the gear out for me. They've been really good, you know. I mean, they bought, when Nick bought the studio, you know, they brought a lot of new gear, a lot of gear that I was unfamiliar with, and a lot of engineers would be unfamiliar with, which is quite daunting when you come into a place and you like jump for a compressor or a microphone and you've never used it before. So there was a lot of trying out of things, which took some time, but they also bought a lot of, you know, classic gear and some microphones that people have actually heard of and that kind of thing. So, you know, they have been really great and really accommodating. Even the live room there, they've put some extra baffling in. They got the acoustic designers to come back in and make it a little bit more live in there, so you can take these baffles on and off. And yeah, I think it's a really good combination of the two rooms, actually. Yeah.
So you can move and mix and match as necessary, and you feel you've got all your options covered now.
Yeah,
pretty much.
I have now. Yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah, I was a little bit worried at the start, but now at the gym, you know, it's all kind of here, really.
Yeah.
Why would I need to move out of Tetbury? Yeah.
What sort of music to work on then? What's the style of music that you'd say you're best at?
I don't know. I mean, I wouldn't say rock as such, but it's more, I guess, anything that's sort of acoustic based, where you've got drums, guitars. Yeah. You know, not so much hip hop or R&B, that kind of thing, which I do enjoy mixing, but you know, tracking for me, I really get the buzz out of putting up the microphones, having the band play, that kind of thing. But you know, I love the diversity as well. I think I'd get really bored if I just went from rock band to rock band. You know, it's nice going from, you know, singer-songwriter to a like full-on heavy metal band to, you know, an orchestral session to whatever, really. Yeah.
What do you think you're going to be doing in, say, 10 years' time? Do you think people will still be buying downloads?
My records?
You're gonna be, what are your ambitions?
I mean, part of my move to here was to actually spend a lot more time mixing and focus on mixing, because that has become my passion. Right. You know, I love tracking, but I really get a big buzz out of mixing. So yeah, really just to spend more time doing that and hopefully become, you know, a great mix engineer.
Do you think people will still be buying records? Will there be people paying for?
Well, I hope so.
Studios like this to still exist.
I think so. You know, I think there's going to be possibly, as the internet gets better and, you know, it's easier to transfer larger file sizes, people won't be listening to so many MP3s. They'll be listening to better high quality again. Yeah. who knows? I mean, it changes so quickly. So I think people will always listen to music and buy music.
Yeah.
People have always copied music, haven't they? Even in the days of cassettes, people dubbed off cassettes. I mean, I did, you know.
Mm.
Yeah.
So did I.